Good morning. I'm glad you was able to join us today for our weekly Sunday school lesson. I hope you are well. I hope that things are going well for you. I hope your family is well. I hope that you've had a good week. I pray that you are being able to join us in our services that we're having on Sunday morning, our split service from service at 9, service at 11. If you can, we're looking forward to seeing you in one of those services. But we continue our study today in the book of Proverbs for our Sunday school. And so let's have a short word of prayer, and we're going to get right into the lesson. Father, I thank you that you've been so good to us. You've watched over and took care of us. You've blessed us. You've given us a good week. And Father, I thank you for that. I appreciate the blessings that you've given us. And I pray, Lord, that you would bless our church. I pray for our pastor. I pray for Brother Jacob and Sister Carrie and the youth, the children. Lord, I pray for our adults, our older people. Lord, I just pray that you would keep your hand of protection over our people and over our church here. And I pray, God, that we'd be a light for you during these trying times. I pray that you would bless those that are sick. I pray, God, that you would touch them. I pray that you would encourage them. For the healthcare workers, first responders, Lord, all these that you would encourage. And I pray, Lord, that you would help me today as I try to teach. Give me the words to say. Bring back the thoughts that I've had to my mind concerning this lesson. And I pray it would be a blessing and a help to someone that's listening. Go with us through the rest of the day, through the rest of the week. And I pray, Lord, that your name would be lifted up, honored, and glorified through our efforts, for we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, our lesson today, as I said, continues in the book of Proverbs. You know, Paul tells us very plainly twice, really, in 1 Corinthians, chapter 3, verse 16, and chapter 6, verse 19, that our bodies are the temple of the Lord. Also, he repeats that in 2 Corinthians 6:16, that our body is the temple of the Lord. So, if believers' body is the temple of the Lord, or the dwelling place of the Lord, and the Lord has given us these bodies and he's left us here, I think he expects us to nurture that body, to take care of that body, and do all that's in our power to make sure that we stay healthy, where we can be used by God as a vessel for him in his service. Really, that is the topic of our lesson today, or the subject of our lesson today. The topic of the lesson is staying sober. The subtopic is God expects believers to be good stewards of the bodies that he has given them. Now, I don't know about you, but I do try to guard my health, and try, because I want to keep my good health as long as I can. I want to do that for my sake. I want to do it for my family's sake, and I want to do it for the Lord's sake. Now, I do have some limitations. As most of you know, I've had several hip surgeries, some hip problems. But and I'm limited in some of the things that I can do as far as exercise, but I do try to do some exercise. Helen and I walk a mile every morning. I try to watch my weight and keep that in check. I try to keep check and control my blood pressure and my cholesterol, and keep a check to make sure my sugars don't get high, and all of this. And I am not so proud that don't want to go to the doctor. I try to go to the doctor regularly for checkups. And if I have something that I think is that I've got going on or is wrong, I'm not afraid to call the doctor and check it out. I just want to stay healthy as long as I can, and be healthy as long as I can. Now, I do know that I could drop dead of a heart attack today or tomorrow, and any of us could. But if I do, I don't want it to be because I've not made every effort to stay healthy. Now, I know that it's not what goes into the body that defiles a man. It's what comes out of the heart. I understand that. Spiritually speaking, I know that. But I do also know, physically speaking, that it is what goes into the man or the woman that destroys a person's health. And so therefore we need to be very careful what goes into our body. Now, one of the main reasons that I try to take care of my health is because I want to be able to serve the Lord just as long as I can. I want to be active in church ministry just as long as possible. Then I figure if I've got good health, I'm 74 years old, but if I've got good health, then I can serve the Lord longer than if my health was not good. Now, although there are many ways that we can destroy our health, there is no doubt that alcoholism and drug abuse, both illegal drugs and prescription drugs, have reached epidemic proportions in our society today. Certainly, they become a prominent feature on the cultural landscape of our land. I'm just telling you. You may ask, is this lesson relevant? Do we really need this lesson? And I got to say, yes, I believe we do. This lesson is relevant for today. I mean, lives are being destroyed. Marriages are being ruined. Homes broken up. Families torn apart. Communities are disrupted by crime that is rampant in our streets. And a lot of this is because of the destructive influence of both alcohol and drugs. Now, what I've said is not even counting all the highway deaths that is caused because of somebody driving while under the influence or on drugs or something. It also does not even take in consideration all the suicides that take place because of these two evils. And yet, what really bothers me is that although these things are evil and they're bad and they're of the devil, what bothers me today in our society, and probably alcohol more so than drugs, that seems to be glorified and set up on a pedestal rather than vilified like it should be for the evil that it is and the harm that it does. Oh, it may start off with a person as a social drinker, but too many times it ends with a drunkard lying in the gutter in the street. It may start off feeling a little high on marijuana or recreational drug, but too often it ends up as a drug addict that's so strung out they don't even know hardly where they are or if they're alive. So yes, this lesson is relevant for today. Now, some of you out there that probably are listening to me either have experienced this in your family, in your home, and I'm telling you, it's there and it's a problem that we're having to deal with. But I am also telling you that drugs and abuse, drug abuse and alcoholism brings about nothing but heartaches, disappointments, and destruction. It is a sin against God, and it is a sin against our own body. And the Bible gives us plenty of warnings about the dangers of addiction. And we need to listen to it, and we need to heed those warnings. Now, our scripture today really covers about 2.5, 3 chapters, I guess, 2.5 chapters. It's taken from Proverbs 22, verse 17 to chapter 24, verse 22. But the main part, our lesson text actually that we're studying, comes out of the 23rd chapter of Proverbs. In these 3 chapter section, Proverbs has been arranged to provide God's people with, I guess, what you could call pearls of wisdom. In these Proverbs, or these pearls of wisdom, if we go by them, it would enable us as God's people to trust Him and to follow His leadership as we live our lives to please God. Now, the first portion of Proverbs of these 3 chapters, this study, the first 10 Proverbs offered God's wisdom about wealth and power and how to control that, and how to use that. And then the second section of these Proverbs, they deal with the parents, of how important it is to bring up your children and correctly and teach them what is right from wrong. And then the final section covers just an assortment of issues, and which includes the seriousness and dangers of alcoholism and gluttony, which is the main subject of our lesson today. Now, the description of a person that is enslaved by alcohol, or really drugs, gives God's people a very good example, but also a sad example of what can happen to a person who totally loses control of their own body. What we need to realize, folk, I'm telling you, that alcohol and drug addiction and even gluttony, it will destroy a body. And that body was a body that was really made to be the temple of the Lord. But instead of them being a temple of the Lord, or a vessel that God can use, it's an unclean vessel, and it becomes a vessel that is used and abused by Satan. So we just need to stay away. Listen to the warning, heed Solomon's Proverbs, and stay away from addiction of both alcohol, drugs, and even the gluttony. Now let's look at verse 17 and see what we have in these verses today. First couple of verses is very general that Solomon is talking about, just giving instructions. Verse 17 says, "Let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long." Now, the fear that most parents have felt must have been felt by Solomon when he thought about the decisions in life that his son would have to face and would have to make, and he wouldn't be there to help him make those decisions. I know probably every parent goes through that. I know Helen and myself, we went through that when our son was growing up and when he became a teenager and then began to prepare to go away to college and all of that. I remember the anxiety that we felt, the fear that we felt. We had done our best, and I'm sure Solomon did his best to influence his son to walk in God's wisdom. But Solomon knew, just as we knew, that one day that child may find his heart turned to temptation that will lead him away from the path of godly wisdom. And so Solomon was warning about that. Parent, I don't care how hard you try. I don't care how much you tell them and how strong you teach it to them. There are certain choices in life that your child will have to make for himself. You can't be there to guide them. You can't be there to warn them. You better have prepared them for life in order they can make the right decision. Now, sinners, those who are sinful, choose foolish paths that they thought that path would bring them fulfillment. That path they chose probably looked appealing. It looked like it would be fun. It looked like it would satisfy. It would fulfill them. A young person really may even envy a path that sinner is taken when they see that person having fun and enjoying what they're doing and having a good time and all these type of things. You know, when we do see people who've rejected the Lord living in a way that appears to be fun and appears to be fulfilling, sometimes even we may envy that person a little bit. And if that's a temptation for a mature adult, just think about how it can wreak havoc on a young Christian that has not had the experiences of life and is not prepared to stay away from that temptation. I know, like I say, it can even influence a mature believer's perspective, not even much less a young person. Even a mature believer, we know, is no match within ourselves for the wiles of the devil. But we do show wisdom when we remember that there is disastrous effects for going after sinful behavior. That what that sinful behavior will do to us is disastrous, and it can happen to us. So we need to just keep that in mind when we see these things going on. We must remember, always remember this: Satan never shows both sides of the picture. He only shows the good side. He only shows the fun side. He only shows the one side. He never shows the other side. Let me demonstrate what I'm talking about. Just think about the alcoholic beverage advertisements that you have seen on TV, that you see on the billboards, that you look at and see in magazines. Think about those. And by the way, let me say this. Helen and we were watching a movie, a family movie. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie or anything like that. We was watching a movie on TV the other night. In 25 minutes, I counted them, there were 5 alcoholic beverage commercials. That's one every 5, average 1 every 5 minutes. 5 commercials that was advertising the glories of alcohol. It would show that attractive woman. It would show that handsome man. And they would be enjoying a beverage together, sitting on a nice serene beach or in a restaurant or something, and they would be just having fun and enjoying that. And that's what that advertisement showed. That's what Satan shows. But it does not show 10 years later when that same man is lying in the gutter, a drunkard, and just has lost his family and his home and his dignity and job and everything else. It does not show that attractive woman 10 years later when her life has been destroyed by alcohol and maybe just has become a harlot and selling her body to whoever will give her money to do what she does. And so, therefore, Satan shows one side of the picture. But, folk, I'm telling you, there is 2 sides to that picture. We better be aware of that. So, aware of the potential temptation of a sinful lifestyle, Solomon just felt he needed to remind his son once again the promises that are there, that are associated with living and fearing the Lord. Now, verse 18 says, "For surely there is an end, and thine expectations shall not be cut off." Fearing the Lord would prompt his son to follow the Lord, to take his path of wisdom, to trust his future into God's hands. Solomon assured his son that a promising future rested totally in his willingness to entrust his life to the Lord. So instead of wandering away from the Lord and drifting into a lifestyle of sin, his son would be much better off if he just placed his hope, his trust, and his faith in the Lord. You know, I'm telling you, hope in the Lord will never be disappointing. Always remember something else that reminds us here in this verse. Always remember, if there is a beginning to something, there is always going to be an end to something. Starting down the right path, making right choices, leads to good, leads to blessings, the hand of the Lord being upon you. But starting down that wrong path, making that wrong choice, that path ends in death and destruction. If there's a beginning, you better think about that beginning, because whatever you begin in, there is an end to it, and we better know what direction we're headed. Really, when we place our trust in the Lord, we can count on Him to give us all that we need, plus His joy, His peace, and His blessings in our life. I'm telling you, I have never been disappointed in the Lord, and I can assure you, you will not ever be disappointed in Him. Then Solomon moved to the subject of what this proverb is all about. Verses 19 through 21. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. Be not among wine bibblers, among riotous eaters of flesh, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. Now, first of all, that first word in that verse 19 says, hear. Now, the word hear means, son, listen intently, listen closely to what I'm about to tell you. It is very important, and you need to take heed to what I'm about to say. Now, this challenge comes on the very heels of a severe warning about envying a sinner's sinful behavior. Solomon wanted his son to understand there is a lot at stake here at the choices you make. Shifting your priority away from walking with the Lord will take a huge toll on us in the long run or in the future. So resisting the temptation to shift our focus away from Him has to be taken very, very seriously. Now, first of all, he mentions about controlling our thoughts. Controlling our thoughts guides our heart into taking right action. Controlling our thoughts means to trust Him to take us through difficult times, through troubling situations. Self-control in our thought life will really keep competing evil influences from taking control of our minds. Then Solomon pointed to two influences or groups of people to stay away from. He mentioned the drunkard and the glutton. Now, Solomon knew that some of these so-called friends would give themselves over to drunkenness, to drinking, heavy drinking. They would keep on drinking until they drink way, way too much. Neither would they and them others with them, these so-called friends, control themselves when it came to food. In that drinking, they would completely be out of control and they would stuff themselves with whatever food they could get their hands on. So they would overindulge in both food and drink until they sunk into a drunken stupor. Now, the Bible has much to say about the overindulgence of both food and alcohol, and a lot to say about the overindulgence of alcohol. Now, in the warnings against gluttony, you look at Proverbs 23, verse 1 through 3, and you can look at Proverbs 23, verse 20 through 21, and Proverbs 28 and 7, and you can see the warnings against gluttony. Also, there are warnings against alcohol. You can look in Proverbs 23, verse 29 through 35. You can look in Proverbs 20, verse 1. You can look in 1 Corinthians 5:11, Galatians 5:21, and even you can use Ephesians 5:18 about the warnings about alcohol. There's warnings about the physical effects of alcohol. You can find that in Job 12:25. You can find it again in Proverbs 20 and verse 1 and Proverbs 23, verse 29 through 35. There are warnings about the mental effects of alcohol in Hosea chapter 4, verse 11. There's warnings about the spiritual effects of alcohol, how it deadens oneself to God. You can find that in Isaiah 5, verse 11 and 12. There are several cases of drunkenness in the Bible which always led to trouble. Let's go all the way back into Genesis. How about Noah? You remember what one of the first things evidently Noah did when he got off of the ark was that he planted himself a vineyard. And then after that vineyard came in, he made wine from the grapes or the fruit of that vineyard. And as he got himself drunk, he was lying there in his tent naked or exposed. His youngest son, Canaan, came by, and he saw his father there. Now, whether he made fun of him or laughed at him or told his brothers in a humorous way, I don't know exactly how he told them, but he went to his brothers and told them what he had seen. Because of what he did, because of Noah's drunkenness, it brought a curse upon Canaan, his youngest son. After Noah found out what had happened, he pronounced a curse and said, you and your descendants will be your brother's servants. So Noah getting drunk brought a harm and brought a curse upon part of his family. And then how about if you go to Lot? Lot, after he came out of Sodom and Gomorrah, after God had delivered him from there, him and his two daughters went into a cave. They got him drunk. And while he was drunk and didn't know realized what he was doing, he committed incest with his two daughters. From that act came Ammon and Moab. And so he committed incest while he was drunk. From Ammon and Moab came their descendants, which are the Ammonites and the Moabites. And these were constant thorns in the flesh of in the side of Israel for many, many, many years after that. Even when they started to go into the land of Canaan, they were still having that problem with them. So Lot's sin brought about misery and for even for the children of Israel. And then how about Nabal in 1 Samuel chapter 25? Nabal, he got drunk and it cost him his life. How about Elah, the king of Israel? He got drunk and it cost him his life. How about Benadad? Benadad was a king of Syria. Benadad got drunk. He escaped with his life, but all those that were with him, all the princes or the young men that were with him, were killed or were slain because he led them into an ambush. Now, this is enough to tell us that overdrinking, or even drinking or alcoholism will get you into trouble. And also, we know that from the alternative to being drunk on alcohol, Ephesians 5:18, it says, be filled with the Spirit. And then also we find in 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20, that we see again, God gave us our bodies to honor Him, for His glory, to honor Him. And drunkenness and gluttony certainly is not honoring to God. Notice the future of people who allow these indulgences to take control of them. Solomon said they will end up in poverty. The need for alcohol makes a person spend all his money. A drunkard will keep on buying it until all of his money is gone. And then he will steal or lie or cheat or even kill, anything to do to get that money to buy that alcohol. The same thing is for the drug addict. Once they're hooked, they will do anything in order to get those drugs. And by the same token, gluttons overindulge in food. Now, they will stuff themselves with food until generally that makes them groggy. Now, being groggy leaves them drowsy. This leaves them unproductive when they work. Now, back in Solomon's day, men worked. I mean, they worked in the field. They were the manual labor. I mean, that's the way they earned their living. And a person that was drowsy or unable to work, and it led to laziness, and that led to a person not working. And so when we're too lazy to work and earn enough money to buy the necessities that we need for us and our families, that will sink us into poverty, and it will drag our families down with us. So as a result of our lack of control, Solomon says we'll end up wearing rags. We'll end up in poverty. Now, I know today in our society, we tend to hold a dimmer view of drunkenness than we do gluttony. But really, God's wisdom prompts us to treat both of them sort of in the same manner. Instead of giving in to the urges to do either one, we need to simply trust the Lord to help us get through our weaknesses. And then next, Solomon describes those who are given to addiction. And I'm telling you, the picture, the portrait that Solomon paints about drunkenness is also a portrait that can be said about the addiction to drugs. It's not a pretty picture, but I think it's one we need to look at. Let me read verse 29 through 32. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. Now here Solomon used a series of 6 questions to identify the problematic behavior of someone who becomes addicted to alcohol. And again, as I said, the same thing goes for drug addiction. The same picture is painted. First of all, Solomon warns us that problems related to emotional fatigue or depression could result from addiction. Emotional fatigue can be marked by woe, by sorrow, by being under undue stress. This is a problem for those who have an addiction. The second problem is with interpersonal relationships that are connected to addiction. We know those who suffer from addiction usually do not get along well with other people. It usually tears a family apart. It tears the home apart. It just destroys everyone that's associated with that person. And then notice the next thing he said, babbling. There is babbling. Babbling means foolish talk, uttering things that doesn't make any sense. If you've ever been around a person under the influence, I know you've witnessed that. You know what I'm talking about. Of course, physical clues like wounds without cause. These wounds either come from getting beat up or getting in fights or falling down that causes this. Also, bloodshot eyes are warning signs that addictive behavior may be going on. So the answer to these 6 questions really provides an opportunity to look a little more intently, a little more closely into the lives of people who have really totally lost control of their lives. They live under the influence and the control of addiction. The more they drink, the more they need to drink, the more they want to drink. Craving something to drink compels them just to really tear in the company of liquor or just keep a bottle with them, close to them all the time where they can get to it. That's where they spend their time. That's where they spend their money. And the same thing can be said about drugs. Same thing. Their addiction drives them to search for a more potent, a more powerful product. For the alcoholic, it starts with beer. And then it goes maybe to wine. And then it goes to hard liquor. For the drug addict, it probably starts with recreational drug, maybe marijuana. And then it go to heroin and cocaine, crack, and all these kind of things. And the more they take, the more they crave, the more they want, and the more and the more and more and more until it just totally consumes them. So the temptation begins with just maybe a glance, maybe being around people that are using it, just a glance. But that glance will many times turn into a gaze, a little longer look. That gives way to another look. And then you begin to partake. You begin to indulge. And then you do it again and again and again until finally, you're hooked and you can't get out of it. So what's the best way really to avoid drug abuse? What is the best way to avoid alcoholism? Well, I think it's really just don't even look. Don't even get around it. Don't even look at it. Stay away from that temptation. Stay away from people who are using it. You know, my dad gave me some real good advice when I was growing up. When I became a teenager and began to be out on my own little bit and was getting ready to go out and leave home and go to school and all this kind of stuff. My dad gave me some good advice that I think is very good. I might have kind of drifted a time or two, but I always kept that in mind and I've tried to go by this. My dad told me, he said, son, you are or you become who you run around with. If you stay around people that stay in trouble all the time, that are always hanging out at places they don't need to be, doing things they don't need to be doing, then you're going to wind up just the same way. You're going to wind up being with them. You're going to wind up in trouble just like they are. So his advice to me was don't hang around with the wrong crowd. You're going to be identified with those you run around with, and you're going to turn into those you run around with, so stay away from them. Now, I'm telling you, alcohol and drugs may look appealing. They look pretty good, maybe when you first see them. But that appearance turns out to be a trap. It's just like you that fish. It's just like you throw that lure out there. You dress it up, you make it look as real and as pretty and just as enticing as you can make it look. But inside that skirt or inside somewhere on that lure, there's a hook. And that fish sees that lure, and all he sees is that enticement. All he sees is that lure, that quick meal. And he makes a dive for that lure. And he doesn't realize there's a hook in that lure until he's hooked, and he's too late, and he can't do anything about it. So at the beginning of the journey of addiction, it seems to have exactly what a person wants, exactly what they need. It claims it'll calm your frayed nerves. It claims it'll settle your stressed out minds. It claims to temper your emotional outbursts that you're having. Matter of fact, it promises to give a good night's rest. But if any of those claims, any of those promises is true, or if they are true at all, I'm telling you, they are of short duration. Then as the addiction and the addictive behavior begins to take shape, there's a need for more and more and more. And that addiction, that behavior, soon it becomes a mandate that you cannot ignore. It must, that desire must be met. It must be fed. It will eventually totally consume you. And in the end, these things don't give the help that they promise or they claim to provide. Instead of being a supportive crutch that helps their victim get through a tough day, they're like a venomous, poisonous snake. Their bite leaves nothing but an infected body that is racked with intense pain and endless misery. The poisonous venom of drugs and the poisonous venom of alcohol, I'm telling you, it stings. And it usually leads to destruction and also to an early death. Then Solomon talks about the problem addiction brings, not just to those who are addicted to it, but also to those who are around them, their families. Notice what it says here. Verse 33 through 35. Thine eyes shall behold strange women. Thine heart shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or he that lieth upon the top of the mast. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. People suffering from addiction display strange behavior. Their minds begin to play tricks on them, and so do their eyes. They begin to make false accusations against people, sometimes their own mates or their family members. They begin to react with violence at people who are trying to help them. Instead of seeing things as they are and seeing things that are, they see things that are not really there, and they see things that really the way they want to see them, the way they want them to be. Then the visions that they are having, which I think they call them DTs, the visions get violent and they become frightening. And they get to be more like hallucinations than anything else. And then the hallucinations get worse and worse as the victim of addiction seeks more drugs and more alcohol. And it's just like a downward spiral. And the more they do, the further down they go, and the deeper they get, and deeper, until it totally destroys them. Matter of fact, they get to the point that they even lose control of their speech. They talk in confusing ways, or Solomon said, talk about perverse things. The word perverse means froward things or fraudulent things. They talk in circles. Their line of reasoning is warped, and they babble, but they don't make any sense. Their words run together as they try to say things and try to utter them. They make no sense when they talk at all. The abuse has numbed their ability for their mind and their mouth to work together so understandable speech can be produced. And then Solomon uses here, and folks, I'm telling you, that type of behavior doesn't just affect that person. It affects those that are around him, especially his family. Especially if it's the husband, and it affects the wife, it affects the children. If it's a wife, it affects the husband and the children. If it's a teenager or a child that is involved, it affects the parents. I mean, it affects the whole family, not just the family, but the outside family, the family members that are not closely there in the home, even those aunts and uncles and cousins and all of that. But then he painted a picture that, using an illustration, I think fits as good as any illustration that we could use. Notice what he said. Picture yourself. Now, in verse 34 is where this is found. Just think about verse 34. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or he that lieth on top of a mast. Picture yourself trying to sleep through a storm that's raging in the middle of the ocean. Now, I've never been out in the ocean in a storm. I've been on, we've been on a cruise, but the weather was good. I've been in airplanes. I've been in small airplanes on one of our mission trips when we flew down to Haiti, and coming back, we was trying to outrun a hurricane. And I'm telling you, it wasn't fun. And the weather we came through in that little 6-passenger plane. But picture yourself in the middle of the ocean on a boat. You're in a ship that's being tossed about by waves. It has peaks and valleys. It's going to and fro, up and down. And this continuous movement of that and side to side and all of that, it just nauseates you, makes you sick at your stomach. And the force of the wind just pushes you one way, and then it'll push you the other way. It'll push you forward, then push you back. And no matter how hard you try, you just cannot get your balance. And everything begins just to seem to go around and around and around and never stop. And before you know it, not only have you thrown up on the floor, but you're thrown down to the floor and laying there, just lying there in misery. Now, with the winds, it continues to whip the ship in every direction with no relief in sight. You're just hanging on for dear life. Now, for anyone drinking or anyone abusing drugs that's intoxicated or drug abuse, that's how it feels to them. Even though they may be lying safely in their beds at home, that is exactly how it would feel. The world is still spinning and going around and around and around and continuing to turn upside down. And they're really just laying there in their bed trying to get a grip on their senses. Now, as bad as that sounds, and that's bad, I get almost a little feeling funny just thinking about it. But as bad as that sounds, imagine being in a ship in a storm, but imagine how it would be trying to hang on at the top of the mast in that ship in that storm raging. I mean, you're way up there at the top, and you don't have anything to catch, and you're talking about holding on for dear life, and everything just totally out of control. That's what Solomon's talking about in the latter part of that verse, is that your body is totally out of your control when it's under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Now, also he pointed out that even you're stricken or beaten, that you're so numb out of your mind that you don't even feel the pain. You don't even realize what happened to you. Being beaten would usually be so painful that the victim would be screaming out in pain. He would be wanting relief. But a person under the control of alcohol or drugs, they wouldn't even know what was happening to them. They wouldn't even know what was going on. They would wake up. They would wake up and wonder, well, how did I get how did I get this way? But even though they did that, only one problem would be on their mind when the person suffering from that addiction woke up. Their pressing problem was to go out and get another drink, or go out and get another fix. Waking up will be difficult. Getting out of the bed will be more difficult. But a person in search of another drink or another fix would work hard to get out of the bed. And once he got out of the bed, he would go look for that next drink or that next fix. And the sad thing is that process is repeated over and over and over again. Now, I know what I've said here. This paints a terrible description of both drug and alcohol addiction. But whether it's drugs or alcohol, it doesn't matter. I'm telling you, I know it paints a bad picture, but I meant for it to. I told Brother Jacob before I started this lesson, you know, I'm not just teaching this lesson because it's the next lesson. I'm not just teaching this lesson because just to hear myself talk or because I want to do this. I hope there's somebody out there today that this lesson will help. If you're out there and you have a problem, get help. There's places out there that can help you. There's people out there that can help you, that want to help you. And I'm not downing that at all, but I'm telling you the greatest help you can find is you can find God. And God will help you. God will help you overcome the problems that you have. So we need to find Him. That's the important one. Now this challenges us, really, as Christians. Control our bodies for use of the Lord alone. Control it. 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20 says this, "What? Know ye not your bodies is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own. You are bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." Now, what I'm telling you is this. The bottom line of this lesson, people, is this. Don't be deceived by Satan. The liquor crowd, the beer crowd, the drug crowd, all of these are agents of Satan. Oh, they may decorate it up. They may make it look enticing. They may make it look attractive. They may make it look like fun, like it's satisfying, it's enjoyment, it's a way to live a complete life. And besides, they may say everybody else is doing it, and it's just a way to be popular and have a good time. But I'm telling you, I am warning you, the end of addiction of both alcohol and drugs is destruction and it's death. Remember, in this series of lessons, the main subject has been what? The main subject of these lessons has been one thing, constant, running through them. Be wise in the Lord. Well, in view of that, let me read Proverbs 20, verse 1 to you. Wine is a mocker. Strong's drink is raging. Now, mocker means puts one into derision or scorn. Raging means to put to silence. Certainly no intelligent speech comes from someone who has an addiction. Wine is a mocker. Strong drink is raging. And notice this. Whosoever is deceived thereby. Now, what did I say the subject of our lessons have been? Being wise in the Lord. But it says here, whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. So don't be foolish. Don't be foolish. There is no wisdom in letting your mind and your body being controlled by drugs or alcohol. As a matter of fact, if you want my honest opinion of that, I'm just going to say, really, it's quite dumb. It's your body. It's the only one you'll ever have. Why do you want to destroy your health? Just to think you can be popular or think you'll have a good time or get some relief from something of that nature when it really has no relief at all. It's only misery and heartache and destruction. So don't be taken in by Satan and his crowd. No matter how pretty they make it, no matter how attractive they make it, no matter how enticing they make it, no matter how much fun it looks like they're having, remember their advertisements, you're seeing one side. There is another side to every one of those advertisements, and it's not near as pretty as the side they're showing you. So I'm telling you, God cannot use an unclean vessel. Keep your body, keep your vessel clean. Keep it holy. Keep your mind clean. Keep it holy. Keep yourself pure so you can be used by God for His service. Don't be used by Satan. Don't be used by Satan's crowd. Let your body be used as a vessel and a service to our Lord. I appreciate you joining us for the lesson today. I hope you've got something out of it. I hope it's helped you, or maybe someone that you know it can give help to. If you have somebody that needs help, let them play this lesson. Let them listen to this. Let them see the direction they're going, and they need to turn to get help and turn to God, because God can help them. Let's have a short word of prayer, and then we'll adjourn the lesson. Father, thank you for your blessings. Thank you for your word. Lord, thank you for the warnings that you give us in the Bible. I pray, God, that every person listening to this lesson today, Lord, you drive it home to their hearts and to their minds. Lord, I pray if there's somebody out there that has a problem, or they have someone in the family that has a problem, God, I pray that they would get help. I pray they'd come to you. Help them to realize, Lord, they're destroying not only themselves, but those that love them. And I pray, God, that you would just touch their hearts and draw them to you. I ask you, Father, that you would continue your blessings on our efforts at the church here. I pray, God, that you would protect our people, keep them safe. I pray that you would give us great services this weekend. Meet with us, Lord. May your name be uplifted, honored, and glorified. I thank you again for all that you've done for us. Go with us through this day, Lord. Give us a good day, for we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll tune in again next week.